Hey friend, do you or someone you know have anxiety about having anxiety? Today we're going to talk about anticipatory anxiety, that anxiety we get about anxiety. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. Or some call it a sound mind, some translations. Anxiety is a product of the fear mechanism within our brain. We're also going to look at some of the different anxiety disorders. At high levels of arousal, so sympathetic activation, high levels of anxiety, the prefrontal cortex shuts off. Like the amygdala has dominance. And so when we have extreme senses of threat, this part of our brain goes dark in order to allow this faster part of our brain to engage in survival. But then we're also going to look at what can we do about these anxiety spirals. So grace has to precede truth. Regulation has to precede reorganization in order for transformation to take place. Stick around, this episode's for you. Welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm Josh Spurlock. I'm a licensed professional counselor with a degree in biblical languages. I also developed a model of therapy called Neuroscience Informed Christian Counseling and founded the faith-based therapy company, My Counselor Online. Every month, my team and I help thousands of people mature into their true self and experience true happiness. We have a 93% success rate and 4.8 stars on Trustpilot. It just works. And in this podcast, we share the secrets we've learned to true happiness, the abundant life that Jesus spoke of in John 10:10. So thanks for joining us. Let's learn something together. Hey friend, we are continuing our series here on the Road to Happiness podcast around anxiety. And today we're going to talk about anticipatory anxiety, that anxiety we get about anxiety. We're also going to look at some of the different anxiety disorders. We've talked about how anxiety is something everyone experiences, but sometimes anxiety is so extreme that it forms what we call an anxiety disorder, which is kind of anxiety out of control in a way that gets in the way of our life. So we're going to dive into what that means and what that looks like. But then we're also going to look at what can we do about these anxiety spirals. Like, are we stuck in just having to manage symptoms in a forever hamster wheel of symptom management and the anxiety is never going to go away? Or is there actually a cure for the anxiety, something that we can do about it? So that's what we're going to unpack today. In this episode, I'm joined here by my lovely wife and co-host, Cassie Spurlock. And let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Anticipatory anxiety.
Do you have any anticipatory anxiety about this episode?
No, but I immediately thought back to our series on feeling sexy and the other work that we do in the sex space, and just thinking about how anticipatory anxiety gets in the way of a lot of that.
It's a real boner killer.
It is.
And literally erectile dysfunction, one of the major drivers for erectile dysfunction is anticipatory anxiety. In sex therapy, the sex therapists, we do work in sex education, the anxiety causes the loss of arousal. And when we have a unplanned loss of arousal and erectile difficulty, it creates fear or anxiety that it's going to happen again, which then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because we get anxious, afraid that it's going to happen, our anticipatory anxiety. And then it does happen again, which reinforces the fear, which creates the loop in the cycle. And it's the same kind of loop and cycle that drives a lot of anxiety disorders, as we'll get into here in just a minute. And so in a lot of ways, or erectile dysfunctions can be a form of anxiety disorder, or at least they're the symptoms of a specific kind of anxiety. So yeah, You totally nailed it. That's exactly nailed it. That's right. No, never mind. Let's leave that alone. Let's look at the Bible.
I'm just saying, God created sex and he's for
That's
it.
true. He's for rock hard erections. That's that Jesus, he made erections. He designed the body for them. We're not ashamed of erections around here. They are Jesus's idea. But I want to dive into 2 Timothy chapter 1 because we believe Jesus authored the Bible, inspired the authors of Scripture, is what we mean by that, that he inspired the authors of Scriptures by the Spirit, and that's how we have the text that we have here today. And he also, according to Colossians chapter 1, was the instrument that designed the nervous system. And so we can study the scriptures and we can study the nervous system, and we won't find any contradiction between good neuroscience and good theology. So we like to interpret the neuroscience through the lens of scripture. And so as we're thinking about anxiety and the processes by which we can find healing around anxiety, I want to look at 2 Timothy verse 1 and 7, chapter 1, verse 7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. Or some call it a sound mind, some translations. So for God has not given us a spirit of fear or timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline, or a sound mind. So what's that have to do with anxiety? So our anxiety is a product of the fear mechanism within our brain, right? Like that is a smoke alarm. Anxiety is a smoke alarm alerting us to a potential danger or threat or perceived danger or threat. And it's activating the fear circuitry of our brain, which exists, in here, in this amygdala and limbic region of the brain is where that signal is being registered. The information from outside of our body, all of our senses, bringing information into our brainstem and the basement or center of our brain, bottom of our brain, and registering some sort of a threat based on learned emotional experiences, so learned emotional memory, and it's going, hey, we got a problem here. Something's up. And it sounds the anxiety alarm, right? And so fear plays a significant role in this process. But God has given us the power to overcome that fear. We talk about the Thrive Drive within Neuroscience Informed Christian Counseling. It's the power of God at work animating our whole system, our whole body towards life and towards the abundant life that Jesus designed for us, and ultimately towards God and right relationship with him and life in him. But so, we see in 2 Timothy, Paul saying that God has given us, doesn't desire for our life to be ruled by these fear systems at work, but he's given us the power to overcome them in a way that enables us to have a sound mind that allows us to train and navigate our life.
And overcoming them doesn't mean muscling through them.
Mm-mm.
That's not how that works.
No, we're actually going to talk about what it does mean. But the front of our frontal cortex here would be generally where we think of a sound mind coming from. Our ability to be consciously aware, have our thoughts, navigate our life based on wisdom. And that happens through the integration of information from deep within our brain through our frontal cortex in a healthy, wise, not anxious, but peaceful, joyful brain is a well-integrated brain that's connected throughout. And so God gives us the ability to do that and wants to kind of move us towards that.
That's actually one of my favorite verses.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I could get a tattoo
On your face?
No.
Oh, Sorry.
like on my arm of the source, actually one of my sweet favorite people just did get one of those for her 18th birthday and showed me. But like, I can't commit to just one thing. Like, so I wish there was like some kind of rotating tattoos. You know what I think they do now?
What?
They do like temporary tattoos.
Yeah.
And then I could just get that for a while.
You
and
could
then
rotate them.
Yes.
There you go.
Taking
Now
a
you
note.
You got ideas, right? All right. So back to anticipatory anxiety and panic attacks and what happens there. So with anticipatory anxiety, we get anxious. We get anxious in a given situation. Maybe it's a social situation and social anxiety, and we got really anxious, felt embarrassed, felt overwhelmed. Maybe it's a work context. Maybe it is, being out in crowds or in some sort of space like that. Maybe it was, any number of situations where we got anxious, overwhelmed, out of our window of tolerance, weren't able to regulate ourselves well, and it felt really bad. It was really scary or really uncomfortable. And then we start to, we have that memory of that experience, and we start to be afraid of that happening again. Right? We're not crazy. We're not making this stuff
because
up.
it really did happen.
Our anxiety is in response to emotional learning. Now, sometimes we feel crazy,
right?
Because the emotional learning is happening in here, like this part of our brain. See if I can pull this thing apart.
I know. I'm like, hold my drink.
Brace yourself.
In case you get
All
crazy.
Right, here we go. So this part of our brainstem, the sort of sensory data comes in from all over the body. It gets interpreted emotionally first before it gets passed off to upper regions of our brain. That this is where that emotional learning exists. And over here is the language part of our brain, up here, right? This is pre-verbal. There's no words in this part of our brain. And this part of our brain is the operating system that we run off of before this part of our brain even grows and develops. And so for the first several years of our life, this part of our brain is not even developed in a way that it's active, and that we run exclusively off of this. And then later our brain keeps growing, we get smarter. This part of the brain finishes cooking in our early 20s.
Which is why our children are so irrational. When they're young, we're like, what? Why can't you understand this? Because literally they cannot understand it.
Yeah, their brain literally is not.
We're working to help this keep cooking.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But the emotional learning that triggers our anxiety exists in this nonverbal, preverbal part of our brain, right? Which is why it's not about necessarily what we are logically thinking about the present. Which is why CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, has limited help with anxiety. Now, it is, if you Google CBT, if you have gotten anxiety help or treatment, chances are what you got was CBT care or what you got directed to. And here's why. Because this frontal cortex part of our brain that CBT engages can help regulate this part of our brain. So this part of our brain communicates back and forth. We call it up-down. So in brain interaction, we have up-down, where these deeper parts of the brain talk to and communicate with these higher upper levels of the brain. So top, this would be the brainstem, the very bottom of our brain. And this would be the very top up here. It's the last part to develop, and where all of the prefrontal cortex, where all of our rational thinking and language and all that stuff comes from, right? And then we have the left and right hemispheres, right? So we've got left and right, so right behind our eyeballs, right? And the emotional information from our, coming apart here. The emotional information from this part of our brain comes up first to the right side of our frontal cortex. This is Alan Shore's work out of UCL Berkeley, and of looking at right hemisphere dominance in emotion processing. But the information comes up from the amygdala in this part of our brain to the right hemisphere, and then it passes over to the left hemisphere in this language part of our brain, which is how we put words to what it is we're feeling and the anxious thoughts that we're having and all that sort of thing. So what cognitive behavioral therapy seeks to do is use this language part of our brain, this left side of our brain, to tell the smoke alarm, which is in here, there's no fire. You can stop ringing, there's no fire. Look around, there's no fire. You don't need to be anxious, there's no fire. No. But this part of our brain triggered for a reason, right? So it actually creates some internal conflict of like, okay, I don't see a fire, but I smell smoke. I don't see a fire, but I smell smoke. And so I'm trying to convince this part of me not to be alarmed because I don't see a fire, but this part of me still smells smoke. So there's this internal battle. It's regulating. It's like, okay, I can calm down. There's no fire, but why do I smell smoke? Because of the emotional learning that triggered the alarm in the first place is coming from real experiences of life that we've had, either physical or emotional threat in nature that we have learned something around. And a cognitive behavioral process doesn't change the emotional learning. There is a process for changing the emotional learning. It's called memory reconsolidation, where we're able to activate the emotional learning and re-experience it in the context of safety and regulation, so we can regulate and organize the experience. And it actually rewires and permanently changes the emotional learning that's triggering the anxiety in the first place. But a cognitive approach doesn't do that. And at high levels of arousal, so sympathetic activation, high levels of anxiety, the prefrontal cortex shuts off. Like the amygdala has dominance. And so when we have extreme senses of threat, this part of our brain goes dark in order to allow this faster part of our brain to engage in survival for us. And so our techniques for regulating this part of the brain only work at lower levels of arousal. At higher levels of arousal, we don't have the cognitive capacity to be able to access the parts of our brain that allow us to engage those cognitive techniques.
Yeah.
And that's why those approaches only manage symptoms, and they have limited effectiveness, and they don't create long-term lasting change. They just can't. They can maybe over time improve the connection between the amygdala and the frontal cortex, allowing us to regulate faster so that we don't reach those higher levels of arousal as often, but they never address the emotional learnings, the implicit learning that's triggering the anxiety in the first place. Okay. So, nerdy brain science. So cool how God designed our brain. And so hopeful because we don't just have to stay stuck on the hamster wheel of managing symptoms. God has wired into us a mechanism to actually rewire the things that are causing the smoke alarm to go off in the first place.
So if CBT work, or, I think what we're trying to capture in that work is, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. We're trying to take that biblical verse and apply it to our lives, but it's just not it's not the whole picture. So, we talk about from the roots, it's so interesting that, when we talk about getting to the root of a problem, it's literally the depth, the inside, the bottom part of the brain. It's just kind of a fun parallel understanding. But if we need to do this memory reconsolidation work, how do we do that?
Yeah. So often and especially in the last 100 years or so, last 50 years, we have thought about the renewal of our mind as being a cognitive process, right? It'd be like renew our mind through memorizing the scriptures, right?
Prayer, which all those things are good.
Yeah,
They're great.
prayer, meditation, dwelling our mind on the scriptures, all these are super valuable spiritual disciplines and practices. They're super great. But that's not the end of what renewing our mind means, right? That frontal cortex process of language and memorizing scripture and storing those things in our mind and bringing them to recollection, super valuable, super good, part of discipleship, necessary, important. We're not dismissing or undermining that at all. We're just saying it's incomplete, that there's actually more to renewing our mind. This is not the only part of our mind. There's also this part of our mind here. Like these are both parts of our brain that Jesus designed and made in emotional learnings that are stored and regulated through the limbic system are as important part of renewing our mind as is learning scripture verses or learning the Bible. And it's actually arguably more important. Settle down. I know that could be a little rowdy for some of you. You're like, what? What could possibly be more important than biblical literacy? Listen, the Pharisees were the most biblically literate people that ever walked the planet. And they were the most spiritually immature people also. Jesus constantly railed against their spiritual immaturity, but they were very biblically literate. And so the scriptures teach us that biblical literacy alone does not translate into spiritual maturity. And so when I say arguably biblical literacy and these cognitive, left brain functions of discipleship are subsidiary to the heart transformation that happens here, I'm saying something that's deeply grounded in scripture. And so I want us to deepen our discipleship process to move beyond only, not stop biblical literacy, but to expand and deepen and even shift the focus into the things that transform the heart, that change the heart here, that move from top down, willpower-based sanctification to heart transformation that from the inside out changes who it is that we are by bringing healing to the broken parts of us in our story, right? That manifests in anxiety. So that's what we mean by that. So how do we go about doing that, right? So there's two things that are necessary, 3 steps, but 2 kind of things that happen in these steps. One is regulation, that we need this part of our brain online to be able to rewire what's happening deeper inside of our brain. And if we are overwhelmed, we can't do that. So we need grace and we need truth. We need regulation and we need reorganization. We need a mismatching or reorganizing experience to the emotional learning that we've had from the past, which means bearing one another's burdens, that is, experiencing regulation, co-regulation with others, while holding the burden, activating, bringing online in the nervous system the emotional learning in the past, and experiencing something different, something new, something truthful and grace-filled in the present in a way that then changes or rewires what's happening here. And then it reconsolidates or resaves that memory, incorporating the new learning that's taken place, which then changes the way our brain responds to those same triggers again. And our brain doesn't respond the way that it used to because it's incorporated this new learning. So grace has to precede truth. Regulation has to precede reorganization of our experience in order for transformation to take place. So very consistent with the scriptures, very consistent with the teachings of the New Testament about how it happens. The neuroscience is just helping us elucidate or understand at a neurological level what the scriptures are saying when it talks about grace and truth and the role that they play in renewing the mind, not at just the prefrontal cortex level, but at the limbic system and the deep emotional learning kind of level, which is super nerdy and super cool and super hopeful.
Yeah, and it's just how Jesus showed up with people. Like, he didn't come and just tell them scripture or only point them back to scripture. He walked with them and he provided these mismatching experiences and showed who he was. And it's what God invites us to in, like, his primary thing is be with me.
Yeah, I am with you. Fear not, I am with you. Be not afraid, I am with you. Yeah, the incarnation, Emmanuel, God with us. See it in so many of the powerful encounters of Jesus in the scripture. Whether it's the woman at the well, where he engages her in ways that break the norms of society and are not what she's expecting, and she has a mismatching experience with him as she's received with grace instead of looked down upon in shame.
Yeah.
Woman caught in adultery, same deal. She come in so dysregulated, in one of the scariest, life-threatening moments of her life. And Jesus just kind of is quiet. He's a silent, stoops down. It's just this weird, he's not matching the
the energy of what's going on.
Of the crowd happening. Like he creates this moment of connection and mismatch that changes everything for her. Zacchaeus is up in this tree and he's in this avoidant place and he's disconnected, and Jesus goes to him, not with a lecture, not with a change your ways, not with a finger wag, but with an invitation to a meal and to come to his house, which would have been unheard of for a rabbi to go to a tax collector's house.
Yeah.
Right. But he creates this mismatching experience where grace precedes truth and transformation unfolds naturally from that encounter, and without any reference in the scriptures of Jesus, telling him to do differently. He almost spontaneously kind of says, hey, I'm going to make right the things that I've done wrong. I'm going to change my ways. He's moved to a different place from the encounter that he has with Jesus. And Jesus says, today salvation has come to your house. Like, Jesus designed the nervous system and the brain. And the author of the scripture, the reason why these things work is because they are the mechanisms that Jesus wired into the nervous system for our benefit. Because, like Philippians tells us, or 1 Peter invites us to bring our anxieties and our care to him, our worries, our fears to him, because he cares for us. And he's made provision for our healing so we don't have to perpetually carry these burdens. That's good news. Hey friend, thanks for hanging out with us. If you've learned something, please subscribe and share it with somebody you love. You'll probably also like some of the other videos that we have, and so we'll link to those around here. Check them out and we'll keep learning together. And remember, Jesus wants you to live an abundant life, to mature into your true self, like the version of you that he created you to be and that he wants you to mature into, so that you can experience true happiness in him, a life characterized by peace, joy, and hope. And we're here cheering you on as you mature into your true self and experience true happiness. We love you, and we'll see you down the road.